Well, I think after hearing that, I realized I'm not even needed. Your two superpowers, I'm obsolete. But like my brilliant thing was that right here, about this part of my arm, I would have an extra joint in between my wrist and my elbow. So that in those really tricky spots when you're trying to get up in the trusses and you're trying to get that one awkward thing in there, you'd have this extra joint that you could like really get into those tricky spots to get the nails in. And that was like my superpower.
Welcome to the next episode of Efficient by Design podcast. So during the first episode, I introduced you guys a little bit. I don't think I even introduced myself. I don't think. So to kind of redo that, my name is Luke Riemer. I am the founder, inventor, developer, I guess, of Akribis Leather. This is my brother, Brad, who we've done a lot together. We framed together. He works in the shop here now. We'll unpack more and more of that over the episodes. And then this is Dustin Heigh, and he and I knew each other both before we were married. We lived together at times, started Akribis Construction together back in the early 2000s. He and his family then toured all over the place, and they've kind of come full circle, come back to the Okanagan here. And his wife has been working in the shop as kind of my production manager for the last two years now.
She's been here for 3.
3 already?
Yep.
So she's been a huge part of that. And then Dustin has recently joined us here to kind of help me manage and work in the storefront and do a bunch of other odds and ends and help develop the company kind of on the front end side of things, which is great. So let's pick up with where we kind of left off last time, which was towards the end of our time framing under an employer and the opportunity we got to step out on our own.
Basically for the move from Edmonton to here, and you inviting Dustin out to the Okanagan and all that stuff. And then
and then where were we at with families at that time? You and Christy and 2 kids then?
The Megan was on the way. So number 2 was on the way, and because I was living with you in your parents' house.
Yeah.
And then we hadn't fully made the complete move.
Right.
And it wasn't until we moved into the townhouse that Megan was born.
And what year was that?
That would have been 2004-ish.
Okay. So that's the year I got married.
Yes.
And then we started having kids then 2006, 2 years later.
Yeah.
So currently now, I've got 4 kids. Brad's got 2 kids, and Dustin as well has 4 kids. So many children between the 3 of us.
And I was gone. So when you guys came there, I was in New Zealand traveling around. And then I remember I'm so stoked that Luke got married. Wonderful lady, wonderful family. But I have to be honest, I was having like the surf trip of my life. And then he's like, getting married at this date. And I had to cut my trip. I was like, I remember, I think it was like, I had like another 6 months to go or something. I'm like, of course I'll be there. I'm the best man. But then I remember I came back, did the wedding. I think I worked in the apple orchards and sold a moped. And then I took back off to New Zealand with Justin.
Sorry for the hiatus.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we were working at that time in Peachland, which is about 35 minutes down the road from where we are currently. And we were building townhomes, I think 4 unit. Is that right? 2 to 4. There were different ones. There's I think 2 to 4 unit townhomes, and they were 3 stories, or 2.5 stories, kind of walkout basement, and 2 floors above. And that was a good gig, but it was coming to an end, and I was then approached by kind of a family friend in the area who owned Sears floor covering in West Kelowna. And I had some flooring experience in years past from working on the island with Michelle. And so this friend of mine, Dave, he approached me and said, hey, I know you have flooring experience and you've done lots of carpentry stuff, and I'm looking for some more installers. Would you consider starting your own company and become an installer for us? And it's something I thought about in regards to starting our own business at some point, and was just not pushing for it, but waiting for an opportunity, I think. And the way it was presented with Sears was that they do the bidding, we're under their WCB, you show up, you're paid by the square foot, and it was like super safe, easy entry into like starting your own company. And so we took that opportunity, and we kind of wrapped things up with Norm that we're working for and stepped into installing flooring. So we did primarily laminate, but we also did hardwood, engineered hardwood, tile.
No carpet.
No carpet. We dealt with carpet though.
Disgusting carpet in bathrooms.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So that was it was a good transition. And I also tried to, I know for me, wherever I was working at any given time, I tried to make sure I didn't lose a sense of contentment in the midst of that job. Like, maybe this is what I'll do. I'll work for this guy for who knows how long, or I'll do this trade forever. And it wasn't with necessarily an intention to move into something else. I wanted to be content with where we were. So when I went into flooring, when we started that, I remember my dad saying like, "Oh, you're going to do flooring? Like, this is like a stepping stone, a temporary thing." I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But at the same time, I enjoy it. We get through them quick. We're good at it. And we'll see what happens. If an opportunity comes up and we get a chance to step into something else, maybe that time will come. But I definitely endeavored to maintain an attitude of like being content in that.
I remember sitting at the golf course with your dad. He took us for lunch, and he gave us the whole, if you're going to run a business speech, you got to do it right. And we kind of did a little bit of a contract sitting there at the golf course, and he kind of, scared us straight. Like, if you're going to do this, you got to do it properly.
Because if something's worth doing,
it's worth doing right. Yeah. So that's probably worth actually a little segue into our dad a little bit.
Yep.
Why don't you pick that up a little bit? Describe dad from your perspective. Yeah.
Well, again, I guess to describe dad a little bit, he's, I think you come by it honestly when you think of like building this thing up and from an early age, kind of there's that perfectionist thing. There is that wanting to do something really, really well. And that was just so much dad. That's just, it's in the Riemer blood, for sure. But again, he helped manage and I think start the Keg restaurant for those in Canada. I don't know if the Keg is in the States.
I don't know.
Anyway, Keg and Cleaver, it used to be called back then. And so he actually, I think, ran a couple of them. One in Abbotsford.
So Keg, for starters, is like a high-end steakhouse. Like they're super awesome.
So I think he started out like in the kitchen, dish pick kind of thing, and then slowly worked his way up to, cook, line cook, prep, waiter, management. And then eventually I ended up managing a couple of the Kegs there. And so, was pretty savvy with business, really good people person. And again, just wanted to do everything so well. And I mean, that was from such an early age, that was a big, push.
And we were really close as a family.
Yeah.
With mom and dad and traveling and summer vacations. And, it was always car camping, backpacking, motorcycle trips with dad. And
lots of music. My mom, both my parents are fantastic musicians, writing songs. Dad traveled with kind of a rockin' band in the 70s. And that's how he met my mom, actually. I think she was out in the crowd and my dad is up there. And when I think of rock band, this is going to be kind of funny, but my dad played the flute. So this is in the 70s when flutes were just like, that was like a wicked thing. So he's sitting there fluting away, making eyes with this chick down in the front row who's just, the flute. And he's like, I think he said to himself in his head, I'm going to marry that woman. And then it was some like super short, like I want to say within 2 months or something, they were engaged or something.
I'm gonna defend Dad a little bit. He also played sax and piano and a variety of other things. He's an incredible vocalist and all that too. But flute was his primary one. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean,
they were engaged and married like fast.
Yeah.
Super quick.
But I'd say you mentioned it last conversation that your dad's drive to do things well and do them right put a pressure on you to the point where you could start to see that the same thing you carried put pressure on other people.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of coming alongside my kind of type A personality where I'm hard on myself, really strong inner critic, that kind of classic childhood of a firstborn where you're trying to satisfy your father who has great intentions and motives and never feel like I'm measuring up to myself, let alone, my dad's hopes and stuff. So anyway, like Brad said, dad's perspective on anything, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. That's how you go about it. So when it came to us starting a business, some of those talks, were on one hand, you're like, we know, but it was great information and we had no idea what we were doing.
No, I remember the first kind of, we needed tools and we had no tools really. And hand framing tools was basically it. But, Tile saw all those things. I remember going into Home Depot and being like, okay, we get a Home Depot credit card, and we're going to buy these tools. And they give us, I can't remember what it was, 6 months or a year, probably a year to pay it off, no interest.
Yeah.
And so I remember being actually in Home Depot, both really excited and really freaked out. Because we're like, we're going to have to owe this money. And if we don't get the jobs, what do we do? Yeah. So I remember going through with the shopping cart and getting really excited. Like, oh, but it can't be that nice of a tool. It was always kind of whatever the good tool was that wasn't too much. At that time it was, no, we can't get the Bosch yet.
Yeah.
We're going to stick with whatever it was.
We got a bunch of rigid stuff, which at the time, Home Depot had just brought on.
Yeah, they were great.
And it was good quality stuff.
Yeah.
It's become kind of their brand now. And I think the quality has gone down a bunch, but we had a whole bunch of rigid stuff that served us great. It was good. Do you remember our first jobs at all? We were, I think, the only 2-man installing crew, I think, at Sears. All the rest of them were single.
And Dave always called us the Greek boys.
That's right. We should explain that a little bit. So we're going to start our own company. We're going to do this very simply, and it's this, it's a great environment to do this in a way that's safe and, like say, WCB is covered and jobs are already set for us. But we're like, okay, we have to come up with a company name of some sort. And so, for those of you watching, Dustin has done a ton of graphic design. He's a poet, and a writer, and an artist, and super gifted in those areas. I've always had, it's a pet peeve of mine, bad business names. And I shouldn't say bad. There's business names I don't like, because I could offend a lot of people out there who use this kind of method that I'm not a huge fan of. So personally, I didn't want to go like, let's have, LD Construction, stands for Luke and Dustin, or Riemer Builders. Like, I didn't want to use one of our names. I wanted something timeless. So I had this kind of concept of like, let's if we're going to call it something, let's call it something that means something that we can stand behind. That's kind of like this idealistic name that's unique. And that kind of gave you some parameters to be like, okay, I have some thoughts and ideas.
Well, and for me, it's always a little bit annoying, but anything I do always has to have these multiple layers of meaning, which can be really tiring for people. But I remember visiting my parents in Merritt, and we hadn't come up with something yet. And I remember, I don't know how, but I ended up just researching words and synonyms. And so we were, of course, talking about, we had worked enough at that point for me to know like what things were important to you, to us. And it was like, hey, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. That type of stuff. So those emphasis on being punctual and being true to your word and building things well. And so I had those types of words in my head. And then I just happened, I think, to come across this word, this Greek word. And I'm like, wait a minute. How does this one word have all these things in it? And it was, I don't know, it just felt like this came out of the blue. And then I remember sending it to you. There was no texting, no cell phones. I can't remember. I think I just called you and said, what do you think of this? And it's this weird word. I'd never heard of it.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward to
when you don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
And
what are they saying? Some people probably what's the most commonly mispronounced?
Akribis.
Akribis.
Yeah, or Akribis, people will say. They'll kind of push that way. But Akribis is the one, because they see the A and the R. and they ignore the K. It slips in between somehow, and they're like, their mind twitches out.
Yeah. But it was kind of an exciting word because we're like, what this has, like, it even had, words like punctual and true and plumb and level and exact. And we're like, this is the goal.
Yeah.
And then, from there, trying to think of even the logo with the use of the triangle was just like, well, this is like the strongest shape. Mm-hmm. This is just the simplicity of what you're doing in building is to build the strength. And the triangle is like the strongest shape in nature. Mm-hmm. So let's use triangles. Yeah. And at that time, the 3 triangles were, the first one was flooring.
That's right.
Inside the triangle.
Yeah.
And then it was a roof line because we were like, hey.
In the last one, it was stairs in the middle one, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. It was a roof line and stairs. I can't remember the exact order. But at that time we were like, hey, maybe someday we'll offer to do roofs for people because that's fun. You loved doing roofs. And not roofing, but building a roof,
that's right.
framing a roof. And stairs, like, that would probably be something people would need, and they're really fun. So it was kind of, we knew we were going to do flooring. I had never done it before. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of pitched it to me as kind of like, hey, I'm wanting to do this, and would you want to do it with me? Yeah. And I felt kind of a sense of like, this is kind of scary, exciting, like, wow, I get to help build something. So I felt a combination of like excitement and fear, but it very much was like me being brought along because you were the one who taught me how to do flooring. I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so very much it was kind of out of my element at first. And the flooring, I just remember the experience of always going into other people's homes. Mm-hmm. And like you mentioned, do you remember the first few homes? I don't remember exactly which was the first home, but we were in a lot of homes that were pretty weird.
Yeah.
And awkward.
Yeah.
And times where we were super uncomfortable, but we always wanted to be really kind and honor them and professional. Yeah. So we wanted to make sure we called them. And again, no cell phones. So we drove into Kelowna with a map. Mm-hmm. Here's the location. We would make sure to call them because we'd always get stuck on the bridge in traffic.
The old bridge.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we're like, we're going to call. We're going to be a few minutes later than we thought. And they would just lose it. Like, you guys are so amazing. And then we'd show up, we'd unload all the hardwood or laminate or whatever. And that was always a bit of a gong show because we'd be carrying piles of these boxes of flooring on our shoulder and doing it quickly and quietly and trying not to disturb the homeowner, but always kind of pranking each other as we passed each other by and doing it intentionally when we knew you couldn't scream about it.
Yeah. And we should backtrack a bit with that. So when we started framing together, years earlier, I like I've mentioned, I kind of came from a background of like, I was on my own a bit more introvert. I played sports, team sports and stuff, but was somewhat more on my own. So I didn't have like a really close group of buddies that we goofed around a lot. I had like 1 or 2 close friends, and that wasn't really part of my history and upbringing. Whereas you grew up with a bunch of guys and like screwed around all the time. Mm-hmm. So that was something that was new to me, was working around you as we became friends, and your freedom to just be a jerk. And like this, it's kind of the Canadian carpenter's love language, between guys that work together, is you prank each other and do stupid things to one another and nail your pouch to the ground. And framing up in high level, I remember working on a wall, and I'm nailing studs to top plate and working away. And all of a sudden, just knock of a hickory handle from a hammer on my shins, like a good hard leave a bruise, make a lump, smack on my shin. I was like, what the? Yeah. Turn around, and here's Dustin, big dumb grin on his face, walking away from me. I'm like, the heck was that for?
I don't remember this.
So that was like oh, it's a game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can play this game, and I'm competitive. So then it became like the stories are endless about the pranks and the things that were done to one another. And that'll have to be an episode of its own at some point.
But it is totally the love language part, like, again, I've told people before, like, if Luke comes by and he like whacks you or like punches you or does something like that, like, it's great. Yeah. It means he likes you, and I remember that's such a true thing, So, and I think because of that though, I think you kind of brought that into the group where once we eventually started working together, it was happening all the time. And obviously, like you said, you know, we had to stop doing it because it got out of hand. But to this day, if either of these two guys walk close to me, you cover your bag. You're going to get either pinched, they're going to pull the hair on the back of your arm, or they're going to hit you with something in the groin or whatever. And I got to the point where Justin and Nathan bugged me because I would often stand, if I'm just standing there, my hand would often just be like right here.
Yeah, right.
And I'm like, why? Like, what's up with the hand? I'm like, and I don't think I even realized it until I'm like, it's a defense mechanism. If Luke or Dustin is around, you have your hand ready to block or to like whatever it is, right? So it's a real thing. And it's to this day, same thing. It's a good thing we're sitting this far apart.
Well, yeah, you missed the microphone I caught in the teeth.
We'll have to edit that in. Yeah. I had to take an opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to loading houses with material, I remember one of the big things too, which Dave, that we worked under, the lead salesman, owner, manager, we'd come back into the office, you know, the next morning or the end of the day, and he'd be laughing. I'm like, what's so funny? What would happen is we would go in oftentimes on a Thursday or Friday and load hardwood into someone's home so it could climatize. Mm-hmm. And we'd come back, you know, the next week to start putting it in. And on several occasions, Dave told us that on the following week after it would have been loaded, he'd get phone calls from the customers being like, those two kids that loaded the hardwood, they're here to install. And so we got flack all the time for being so young because you know, we were in our early 20s.
Yeah.
And we looked young.
Yeah.
You know, for our age on top of that. And Dave had to like go to bat for us on multiple occasions. So like, no, these guys know what they're doing. They're good. They're quick. They do a great job. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah.
Because we'd show up to deliver stuff and be like, oh, we're just the delivery boys.
Yes.
Which is a regular occasion.
And that's how the Greek boys kind of, we got called that. Oh, the Greek boys are here every time we'd go in to pick up our material.
And back to that, the Greek part, I think we didn't actually explain that the word accurate, is that correct? That where we get the English word accurate is a derivative of Akribis?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that was like the root word of accurate.
I don't know. We'd have to look it up. Yeah. But it sounds good.
Sounds
That's
good.
great.
Sounds really good.
I think that's it, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking too, like our setup at that time, I had a Ford Ranger.
And let's settle this right now. It was purple.
It was midnight blue.
It was purple.
It was
wicked purple.
It was
That was a legit wicked truck.
It was a cool truck. Yeah.
Yeah.
but it wasn't blue.
All right.
Was it? It was a single cab short box.
It was an extended cab.
It was.
And it had a 6-foot box, I think, on it. And yeah, it had a bit of a lift to it, and I used to tool around in the bush lots with it. And then I put a canopy on it, and I made a pull-out bed out of a sheet of 1-inch plywood. So we had all of our tools. This is like ghetto bed slide.
It was not ghetto. It was awesome.
It was pretty awesome. So I had a sheet of 1-inch plywood, and I had routed in handles into it. I'd put plastic runners under it. And so you grab these handles, and all the tools were all on this deck, and you'd slide it out of the back of the truck, and then there was legs that would fold down. So you could pull it out, legs would fold down, you could access everything in there.
And we that's where our cutting station was.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked out great. And then our process for like installing, we ended up kind of developing was because I had a lot of experience having put down flooring. Basically, you end up being cut guy, and I would basically be on my knees, my knee pads on or whatever, and I would be, usually it's laminate and hardwood that we're doing most. I would be throwing it down as quick as I could, and then yelling you measurements, and getting you multiple pieces, and you'd be just huffing her back and forth to the tools.
And bringing you boxes of more wood.
Yeah, and we got really quick, because I know we'd come back to the shop, and Dave's like, he's calling her quits for it, and we're done. He's like, there's no way you're finished these already. And so yeah, we got really quick, and it was super fun, and that kind of developed that. That was kind of similar to my earlier days framing when I was doing production framing in Edmonton, building apartments, where it's like there was a joy and adrenaline around that environment when you're working with other guys and you're pumping out product fast and you're chasing each other. It's like, we're getting a ton done. Like that. Those are the days you go home in the day and you're like, that was a good day. I am beat, but I'm proud of what I got done. We worked together as a team, and you're driven to like try and find more efficiency in it, because like that's such a draw. And so kind of finding that with flooring again was super fun.
Until you either get a job in a trailer where in between the floor joists is like this big U shape, or some bonehead drops a pry bar down the toilet, which
was so awesome. So that
you got to tell that one.
I know you tell that one. Yeah. So we were in, I don't think it wasn't a trailer. No, it wasn't a trailer. It was in a assisted living or a gated community. So a lot of the houses we put flooring into were for retired people.
Yeah.
They're retired. They're looking for to spend their money. Let's put some new flooring in. And we were doing, what was the material? We were doing tile into a bathroom. We put up laminate maybe, or lino.
It was primarily hardwood, and it was pretty involved because there was like some borders and stuff that we were doing, and we had to do
some picture framing and stuff.
Some picture framing work. And then I think even the hardwood was going into the bathroom, because I don't remember doing tile in there. But we came into the bathroom, and so our routine was to pull the toilet off, get it all clean, put a rag in the hole, so make sure we didn't drop anything in there.
Yeah. So we had done the prep work. We get the toilet off, and we'd had a discussion. Yeah, make sure we put a rag, put something in the toilet hole, which we missed.
I don't know. I don't remember why, but there was no rag.
Yeah. And so Dustin's over in that area, and we had this nice little, what brand? Was it Japanese?
I don't know. I feel it was blue. It was blue. I don't know if it was an Est-Wing, like mini.
There's a wide blade on it, and a little nail puller on the other end. It was like this little tiny bar.
It was the best.
It was an awesome little thing. Yeah. And I look over to see Dustin doing something, and he fumbles it. Oh. It goes in the air, and it was like hit, flip, and like slow motion straight down the toilet hole. Disappears. We're like, okay, now what? we're not plumbers. This place have a crawl space, I guess. Like there's no basement. Yeah. So we're like, oh shoot. So yeah, it was then like, okay, where's the homeowners? Where's your crawl space access? Go down there, find that. Fortunately, it was a crawl space, and the plumbing was all exposed. And we'll go down there. We find where the trap is. I'm like, okay, this would be the spot. I guess we'll have to cut this and get a coupling. And
I had no idea, like what. Yeah. Now knowing how to do that, it's not that big of a deal. You go down there and you'd sort it out. But at that time, I was like pale faced.
Yep.
Like, what's going to happen?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So long story short, we ended up cutting it and getting a sleeve and putting it back together, and it didn't end up being a big deal. But it was one of those like, hey, from now on, let's make for sure.
But how many times of us working together do we do the line, okay, there's no rag in the hole, or there's no railing around this hole for the stairs, and Dustin drops something or falls in over and over and over.
I wish you were wearing shorts right now, because we'd get a camera to zoom in on his shins. He has scar tissue from his ankle to his kneecap on both legs, because he was just chronically bashing his shins, falling into holes.
Constantly.
It's unreal.
But that job in particular, that kind of dropping the bar down the toilet was kind of the start of what ended up being kind of a nightmare job. And I remember it being a pretty significant time of me realizing, because let me frame it this way. In our time of working together, you're always one to be like, hey, we're going to do the best job we can. We have to make a decision and carry forward. And I would be, no, we need more information. I'm not comfortable. And so it would usually get to a point where you would have to be like, well, we got to make a decision. And you try to be gracious to me putting the brakes on. But I remember that particular job, because not only did I drop the bar down the hole and feel like a dummy, and feeling that pressure because it took a lot of time, and you're just watching your hourly rate go down,
right?
But feeling really crappy. And then the floor, do you remember? We installed the entire floor. It was beautiful, incredible, good job. They were so happy, but it creaked.
Yep.
And we had to rip it all up.
Yep.
Do it again, and it creaked again.
Yep.
And it was a manufacturer flaw.
Yep.
But again, it was a question of, are we doing the installation properly? Are we gluing right? Whatever. Yep. And I remember it being a time of learning a really valuable lesson from you, which was you can only do the best you can do. And up until that point, you have to make a decision and accept whatever the result is. And so don't be afraid of it. If we got to redo the whole thing, we redo the whole thing. but we're doing the best we can, and we're going to keep learning, and we're going to just keep moving forward. And I would usually get scared and want to pull back and be like, no, we need to research, blah, blah, blah. And it would often be a point of tension in a job if I ever had to do something that I didn't fully know for sure. And it was like I look back at it as a good experience for me of learning to try to trust myself and actually be willing to make a mistake, which, like you commented last time, learning to give that grace to the people that work for you, to say your mistakes are safe here, even if it costs. Because there's no way to learn or grow without having the freedom to make a mistake. And that was something I think we had to push through together to try and learn.
Yeah, there was a lot of growth happened there. That was a big part of, I think, a realization for me dealing with people and eventually employees and kids that, you know, like I grew up looking forward to having kids since I was probably like 12 or 13. Like I thought I'm going to have 2 boys like mom and dad did, and we're going to be close, and I'm going to be a good dad. And like I always look forward to it from when I was really little. And if I'm going to treat them the same, I'll be super consistent and be straightforward. And through situations like that and situations with my own kids, where it became very apparent that you can't treat everybody the same. People aren't the same. They require different things, and you need to cater to them within reason, and that's more work. But if you're going to care for them and respect them, that's what's required. And then in turn, how do you also deal with your own stuff? How do you acknowledge that you're a different person from them? What makes sense and is logical to you is not going to be what makes sense to somebody else. And later on in life, to acknowledge the reality that, you know, anything that somebody else says, does, or thinks makes complete sense to them. Even if I completely disagree with it, to them, they're not saying something that's asinine on purpose. That's honestly their conviction, their position at that time. So that, you know, you and I working together, you know, that was a two-way street where I'm having to like respect you in the midst of your processing. And in turn, you're having to like develop some self-confidence and willingness to make mistakes, and that's okay. But yeah, those were some really good times and some difficult times too. When you're working with, like it's been a blessing and a curse over my career to have basically worked with my best friends and family, you know, my whole time. And fortunately, you know, we've done the hard work to work through tough times to maintain really good, healthy relationships, but that hasn't been easy.
No, there's definitely been hard moments of having to say sorry and talk it out. Yeah.
Because the personalities are so vast, right? Between even just the 3 of us, you know, like, you know, and I, especially when I look at the 2 of you, you know, not surprised that you're still friends, but, you know, without again, thinking about, you know, friendship and our families and about what's important, you know, you could see how so many relationships like that were like, well, screw you, I'm done, you know, and like you thought this, well, I thought this. And, you know, so the fact that you guys put the time in and are able to sit here and do this is pretty awesome. Yeah.
It presents a unique type of relationship that you only have through long, hard work. And, I think there's a value in that you don't get any other way. Because you can have friendships that are quick and easy, and usually that's how people build friendships, is it's quick and it happens fast and you have all these things in common. But to work together, like we've known each other, how long? 20, what do we have?
25 years?
25 years. And to have a friendship, like we work together again now, but have worked together lots in the past. I've worked with your wife, you work with my wife, and we hang out and play cards every Friday. Like that's unique. That has a value that I know we both cherish a lot. But it is something that I look at and go, man, that's something that has cost. And you just hold the value of that. And to see that, you know, we can live in the same town and our whole families, our 2 families are family. And that's pretty rare to have that. And that's a really special thing. And to be able to look back, like I remember so many moments, the three of us, after starting to work together, once we started getting into the framing, just those little moments of like coffee break and some stupid little game will break out where we're trying to throw a rock at something. And I just can't have such fondness for those moments of like sitting with our legs hanging off a deck and we're trying to have food in one hand and we're trying to eat our lunch. And at the same time, we're trying to hit some dumb boulder below with our rocks and just laughing, having such a good time and enjoying that experience like that. Those were some really, really good times.
And I mean, the fact that you guys, your two families, you guys get together and you play cards and like I've never been invited on Friday and it's fine. Like
you still love us.
I still love you and I feel loved, but I don't get called, but
well, and and it goes both ways. When the Oilers game is happening and you're doing a barbecue and you have people, everybody but me.
I know.
So,
but you're kind of artistic, so I didn't think you'd be
that I'd be into the sports.
Yeah.
But it's fine.
It's water under the bridge.
So much water. Yeah. Okay, so
you were getting a little teary there. I saw the little watery thing there.
I was keeping it together.
And Luke was making sure he wasn't making eye contact because he'll start crying like a baby.
That's right.
It helps looking at the triangles because they're really bright.
Yeah.
So it kind of gets you back.
Glaze you over.
Yeah.
So anyway, you were doing houses.
Well, doing all the flooring stuff. So we can probably kind of skip ahead to the conclusion of the flooring. There's so many other stories and moments that we'll get into later.
Can you just tell me the one story about Dustin dropping a deuce and you, this one?
All right.
That's the one I was looking forward to. I just want to.
Okay.
Well, I alluded to one. It's only a quick 10-second story, but that I love with fondness because I was so happy about it. Is we were unloading all the hardwood, which took a while, and we would always hustle. And so you're hustling and passing each other, and you're carrying. We was a competition, like Luke says, it was always competitive. How many boxes can we carry? And he passes me in the doorway, so you have to turn sideways. And the homeowner, often this was so weird. The homeowner, usually if they were elderly, would sit in a chair and watch.
Yeah.
And so they'd be sitting right over there watching, and Luke's turning sideways, so his back is blocking the homeowner from seeing what I'm doing. And he's got an armful. And he's walking past. I have no load bearing on my shoulders. I'm free, both hands. And I get a full grasp of each nipple. And I pull and twist as he's moving past. And he's trying not to make any noise. Right. And the tears are coming out. And his face is beet red. And I hang on as he's moving past. It was so awesome because he couldn't do anything about it, which is the same as the one you're alluding to. He couldn't do anything about it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. So
later on, I don't know if it's the same year or whatever, but we were doing a house. This one was out by the airport, near the airport in Kelowna. We were way out north, doing hardwood, and Dustin has always had bowel issues. I'm going to leave it there. He's in the can often. It just happens.
It's a problem.
It's a problem. So there's a moment where he's in the can, taking care of business, and I am working on a piece of hardwood, which I still have at home. It's a piece of oak, and it was a piece of picture frame that was between the tile in the kitchen and all the boards that were running into it. So I had this board. It's maybe 2 feet long, and it terminated against an angled island. So it had this like quite long angle on one end, and I had to set it down from above. I think I was working between two finished surfaces. I was going to glue it down and pin it from on top. So I had to cut, in order to drop it straight down, I had to cut the bottom of the groove off this piece of oak. So I went out to our table saw and set the blade height to where like 5/16 of an inch, and then set my fence so I could just basically rip the bottom of the groove off. And this piece of wood was angled. The long point was angled up to the left, so I was running it through the table saw, and you're putting pressure against the fence, and I think it was a 3-inch wide board or something. I ran it through, and No, it was the other way around. The long point was back to my left. So I ran it through, and as I'm pushing against the fence, I just get it past the blade, and because I'm pushing against the fence, it teetered on that short point of the cut, and so it turned this way. Well, then the blade catches the piece of wood and spits it back at me, and the wood gets fired at me and hits me right in the junk, and my hand, which is on the far side of the wood, gets pulled into the blade. And so fortunately, again, the blade is only up, 5/16 of an inch or so, but I get my 2 middle fingers in the blade, and it went straight in the tip of my middle finger and then in the edge of my ring finger. And there, you can see them. This one's angled and this one's pretty flat. And so it sprained my wrist too, like torqued my wrist. I remember my wrist aching, and I'm doubled over the table saw, and I'm like, been bagged, and I'm looking at hamburger at the tip of my 2 fingers. I'm just like, this is bad. This is a bad moment. And of course, it happens so fast.
Yeah, you're probably in shock almost immediately.
Yeah. And like we use table saws. We use table saws all the time. We freehand cut on them. We're safe, but we were very skilled with them. I think this is the only table saw incident I've ever had. And so I'm doubled over, trying to catch my breath. I'm looking at hamburger in my fingertips, and I turned this off, and I think I walked over to the bathroom, and I'm like, "Hey, Dustin, we gotta go. I cut myself," and I don't know why, but you were thinking, I think, that I was wanting you to hurry up.
Well, I'm on the can, and to make best use of my time, I was talking to my wife on my phone.
We had cell phones by now. That's right.
So a little flip phone, and I'm chatting to her about whatever, and I'm on the toilet. And
Poor wife.
And the fan was on. Yeah. So all I hear is a dun dun dun, and then run the phone. And I'm like, what? I don't know what he's saying. Luke's talking to me, and I'm trying to talk to Christy, and then Ray, can you find the finger? And boom, 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 and I'm like, say to Christy, okay, I don't know what he wants. He probably wants me to go back to work. He's probably annoyed that I'm on the can again. And he gets louder, bang, bang, bang. And then all I hear is, cut my fingers, table saw. And I'm like, I gotta go.
So there's a bit of time between. Because at first, I heard your first response, and you didn't give me much, and you seemed annoyed. I'm like, oh.
I was.
So I'm like, oh, he's kind of upset. And I'm like, I'm in shock. I'm not thinking straight. So I'm like, oh, I'll just give him a minute, I guess. So I go into the kitchen, and I'm like, the people weren't there. So I grab a tea towel out of their kitchen, and I put it on my fingers, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go sit down for a minute and kind of catch my breath. So I sit down, lean against the wall. Get out of here, fly. And I sit down, lean against the wall, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm gonna have a look. And I wasn't bleeding much at all for some reason. I had my hand up.
Just kind of got the white and nasty tissue.
And so I pulled the cloth out. I'm looking at my fingertips, like, holy cow, look at that meat, pink meat in there, and busted up fingernails. And then all of a sudden I was like, whoa, queasy, like, totally kind of sick to my stomach, which I've never had before or since. That was the only time it's ever bothered me. I was like, okay, I need to not look at that for a minute and not pay attention. And I started kind of get my wits about me again. And the shock was still, doing its job and like protecting me from the pain. But I started to think a little more clearly. I'm like, we need to go. Mm-hmm. I'm going to sit out here for a bit now. So I get up, come back to the other, Dustin, we got to go. He's like, what? I cut myself on the table saw. And you're like, you what? Yeah. And that was when you're like, oh, shoot. And all of a sudden he finishes the paperwork and out he comes. And he's like, oh, crap. Okay, let's go. So we load up and get in my truck.
I was discombobulated when I came out because you're all white and holding your hand and I hadn't seen it. So I'm like, did he cut his fingers off? Yeah. And then I'd go to like, let's get some like frozen peas or something. And he was like, no, let's just go. And I kind of did some circles in the kitchen for a little while. And then finally we end up going. Yeah. And I remember driving and you're sitting there and you're starting to say, oh, it's starting to hurt. Yeah. And we get into the emergency room and I remember sitting there and they had the TV on in the waiting room. Yeah. And it was an operation that was really gross.
It was on, was it on animals or something? It was some weird.
It was really graphic surgery in the waiting room. And there's kids and you're sitting there like trying to keep it together. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what kind of cruel joke is this? That's right. As you're trying to like not pay attention to the carnage on your fingers. Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember that drive took a while. Because it's the other end of town to get to the hospital. Yep. And it was halfway through the drive that, shock wears off and you start getting the waves of pain. And it felt like every 15 seconds, you get that wave and your knuckles all ache, your wrist hurts, your elbow, your shoulder. It's just like this like aching deep, like, oh, I want to puke. Like it just felt
every time
gross.
your heart beats, it's like the throbbing.
It was terrible.
Thing that, yeah.
So I get to the hospital and go check in. And then I'm like, well, there's a bit of a wait and I'm not bleeding out. So they're not going to push me through quick. So you're like, well, I'll go back and wrap up the tools. An hour and a half later, you get back. I'm still sitting there. Like, you're still here? You haven't helped? You're like, no. Go to the front, and turns out the nurse is like, oh, we changed shifts, and you got lost in the queue. Sorry, we missed you, and now there's a queue again. You got to wait. I'm like, this is insane. I've been like 3 hours now waiting to get some help, and like, well, there's a clinic, a walk-in around the corner. You can go check there.
Oh yeah.
We go over there, and they will walk straight in, and doctor's like, okay, yeah, we can't stitch anything. You're just kind of a mess. There's nothing stitched together. We'll just bandage you all up, and then you can give you something for the pain. Do you want pill or shot? You can give you some morphine. I'm like, what will help fastest? Well, the shot. Okay, well, give me a shot then. And again, within 5 minutes, I'm like, this is great.
Oh, you were so funny. I forgot about
so
that.
happy. So then the drive back home, I was in the passenger seat, just like this. Who
You were
cares?
loving life.
It was
you
great.
Were loving
And
life.
and my wife and I were going on our first anniversary that weekend.
It looks high as a kite.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we go off to Halcyon Hot Springs.
Yeah.
And I got my hand in a big bandage, and we spent the weekend with me in Hot Springs with my hand up over my head. And I missed one day work on Monday, I think, and I came back on Tuesday. It went back at it, and I was trying to work with this big stumpy. And that day, I hit that hand 3 times. I remember I stepped out of the patio door onto a piece of hardwood and slipped, and I had our new rigid DeWalt or a rigid drill in my left hand.
Yeah.
So I planted my right hand to catch myself.
I remember these.
And then I was prying on a piece of hardwood in the corner of the closet, and the bars slipped, and I smashed my fingertips. It was just like sit down in the corner and try not to puke.
Yeah.
Every time. It was a bad day. That sucked. So yeah, there's the.
Thank you for that.
stories,
I have
yeah.
never actually heard you two talk. So there's a lot of pieces in there. I'm like, oh, I didn't know Christy got to be with you in the bathroom. I didn't know that you got the morphine. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, good time.
Yeah, the flooring season was definitely really busy and lots of learning. Yeah.
So then, like you said, skip ahead to
The framing.
first.
Yeah. So then I got approached by another family friend who was actually a plumber for a high-end builder in the Okanagan here. And he approached me and said, I know you have primarily, framing background and you've been doing flooring, but there's an opportunity with this builder that I do work for where they're looking for another framing company, and curious if you'd be interested in moving in that way and talking to Matt, the owner, and seeing if there's an opportunity there. And so again, I was like, well, maybe. Like we've been happy where we're at. It's going good, but this is an opportunity that's going to open door in front of us. So let's just see. So end up meeting with Matt, the owner of the time that was Rivendell Homes, which was, shortly, they put that business together shortly after the
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings movie. So that was kind of their, Rivendell Homes was the company, high-end custom home builder, and they were looking for more workers, more framing contractors. And talked to Dave about, exiting doing flooring and stepping into framing and running a construction company instead. This fly is driving me nuts.
I remember there being kind of some key reasons why we were wanting to do it. They were, from what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, newish on the scene as builders, and they had a high standard, and they were keen on getting a younger kind of framing crew that really wanted to build quality. They seemed to have a desire to build a new connection that would be long lasting.
And that seemed to be a really good fit
Yeah.
for us. We were like, everything about it was like, there was harmony there with what Matt was after, how we operated. And like you kind of alluded to before, we developed a good reputation, which I thought was stupid, because people would just sing our praises because we would show up on time. And we would call if we were going to be a bit late.
Yeah.
And we were respectful. And in times where the homeowner would pull up a chair to watch us work, we wouldn't say, we're not doing anything until you leave. And I've heard that so many times. You see this on social media all the time. Homeowner shows up, everyone drops their tools until they walk away. Like, I understand that position, but that doesn't show respect to them. And it's going to be difficult and it can be frustrating. I remember flooring jobs where homeowners there literally following me back and forth to the saw, looking over my shoulder. He was interested.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy it, but at the same time, like, it's okay. I'll just kind of deal with it, and this job will finish. And
I remember the old guy who sat on his chair, and we were moving, the floor's getting closer and closer to him in his chair, and he just would scooch it back.
Yeah.
We'd keep going, he'd scooch it back, and then he would move onto the new floor and watch. But I remember it was usually in those homes where they would make a few comments and you could connect with them.
Yeah.
And often they'd make us some sort of dessert or say, hey boys, could we make you some lunch? And it was just the best.
Oh, if you could list off the things that some of the homeowners would bake for you or make for you, or like lunchtime or end of the week, like,
this is so good. I remember one of them offered, do you want a cheese and onion sandwich? I was like, a what? A cheese and onion sandwich. Okay. I like cheese and I'm a fan of onions. I've never put them together, and it was amazing. I was like, this is a thing.
White
It's
bread?
really good. Yeah.
Have you made it since?
I think a couple times. Like, it's pretty good. It's odd, and it gives you a nasty breath.
Kind of like a Riemer melt. Odd, gives you bad breath, and it's delicious at first, but then you get some bowel issues after.
Okay, I'm curious. So you brought up the Riemer melt, so now everybody's wondering what the heck's a Riemer melt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's hear you describe what is a Riemer melt, and then we can
Correct him.
correct you.
Okay.
I had 2 days ago.
Okay. Here's what I remember. I've only had them once when you guys were living in the apartment with Justin and Nathan.
Yep.
And I was over and you were like, hey, you want a Riemer melt? I don't know what that is. You made me one. And I'm like, what's in this? This is what I remember. So it could have evolved.
Have you had one since?
Nope.
No.
Oh, we have to.
Oh.
So it was, a sandwich. So bread and mayonnaise. And I believe it was ham and cheese and peanut butter.
And tomato.
Yes. And tomato.
And usually some pepper on the. If Dad was going to make it, he'd have the pepper.
And
on
it was like grilled
Your
in
order
a pan
was a little
on
bit
the-
out.
We would usually, it's toast. We do toast, and then peanut butter, mayonnaise, meat, tomato, cheese, and then you like broil it or bake it a little bit.
Yeah.
In the oven.
And so I remember being like, well, that sounds disgusting. And then I had a bite. I'm like, wow, that's actually yummy.
Yeah.
And then the second bite, that's a lot of grease and a lot of oil. And my body doesn't do well with that.
Sure.
So it ended the relationship pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the Riemer melt.
Fair enough. Yeah. I do think you should try it again. And then maybe with a less greasy meat or some other substitute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where were we before that happened? We were talking.
Well, we were just in the transition to, taking the job to work for Rivendell and build
food, right.
build our first house. And we were talking about
right.
food because
Yeah.
people, well, you were actually saying that our reputation was somewhat unfortunate in the sense that we were just doing what people should do, which is be courteous.
Yes. Yeah. So I was always, and this was confirmed later on, as we were doing custom homes, and I basically managed, I was like a project manager, the role that I kind of took on with our builds, and we developed a really strong reputation, being highly sought after. And I was like, this is dumb. Anybody could do this. You care, you do good work, that you can sleep at night once you've done it. You communicate to the people that in a way that you would expect them to communicate to you if you were them. Mm-hmm. It's not rocket science, but it's so rare in the trade world. I mean, I think, tradesmen, which I understand, I've heard so many times guys talk about how, I never had as good a time or made as much money as when I was working by myself. Mm-hmm. For this period of time, I hired all these guys and this big crew, and it was nothing but headaches and terrible and mistakes, and I lost money. It was just miserable. I'm like, well, I can't say that's a reality, a consequence of that situation for everybody. That might actually more so reflect on the kind of tradesperson that you are and what works for you. And if you're a person that is better on their own, that's okay. Mm-hmm. But you can't take that person, plug them into that other environment, and then say that it's the environment's fault.
Yeah, right.
That's happening. So yeah, just like dealing with people well and that reputation that we built, and then also trying to always get better, improve along the way, end up to be a really good recipe. So yeah, then we end up partnering up with Rivendell, with Matt, and we'll wrap it up here pretty quick. Let's talk about the first job.
Yeah.
So from a bidding standpoint and like organizing the project and what are we going to start and how's this going to work. They were talking to Matt, looking at the plans and going over everything. And I'm kind of turning my framing brain back on again. Okay, we'll get into this and ordering materials and getting trusses and all stuff figured out and timeline. And we had a good chat. I'm like, okay, yeah, this all looks great. So, just let us know when the cribbing crew is done, when the foundation's all ready to go, and we'll come to get rolling. And he's, what are you talking about? Well, let me know when the foundation's ready and we'll come frame. He's like, no. Here in the Okanagan, like in BC for the most part, the framers do their own concrete. We don't have any cribbing crews. This is on you guys to do your foundation. Okay. So I'm like, in my brain, I'm going back to my, the apprenticeship courses and thinking about, doing concrete and forming. I'm like, I've never done it. Like I'm not afraid to try, but I'm like, I'm also not so naive that I'm going to just dive in without some assistance and that. So I'm like, okay, to totally level with you, Matt, I don't have hands-on practical experience with concrete. We haven't done that. I'm willing to take the stab and get after it. And if you're willing to allow us to learn through this job, then we'll take it on, but I'm going to want some assistance. We'll want to see if we can find some people to come along and help us with the first one. Which was what ended up happening. A couple of the framers that he's worked with in their company were able to come and basically do the foundation with us to get through it. And right away, so I'm in like ultra learning mode as we're doing that foundation. I'm watching what they're doing. I'm thinking back to schooling stuff.
And it wasn't an easy foundation.
No. So this was up in Heritage Hills. It was up on the mountainside, south of Penticton. Custom home, like I'm thinking the elevation from where you drove in to the garage, out the back, down at the bottom. Like there was retaining out the bottom and the bank went away. Like it was a full walkout basement, halfway down a bank and retaining walls below.
A lot of I remember the steps, a lot of them had to incorporate the rock and having the engineer there to make sure wherever we were going onto rock and everything. So you had this combination.
So a bunch of it was onto bedrock.
It was,
and then you're drilling into bedrock.
I can't remember if we were epoxying in dowels on that one or not. That was with David Craig. In all those days. So regardless, it was a hairy foundation.
Yeah, it wasn't just a flat.
Yeah, it wasn't a flat lot. That's for sure. Lots of steps and high walls and. It was interesting because I remember like through the process of working with Ken and Brooks and the way that they were doing footings and the walls, there was things about like, we're going to do this the way that they're recommending, but I'm seeing a lot of ways I'd want to tweak this when we do it ourselves. So there was a variety of things. I was like, I think we'd want to be more particular in this area. Like if we do our footings really level and really square, that'll make the walls easier to do really level and really square, which makes the framing easier to do level and square. And so, I'd experienced the reality of working on really bad foundations in my earlier framing days. I'm like, we don't want to do that. We want to make this easy on ourselves. We got through the foundation and learned a ton. And then we got into the gravy, the framing that we loved. And at that time, so when did you join us? Was it on that house?
Yeah, I was probably about halfway through that house, I think, is when it was, because I wasn't there right at the beginning. I think the foundation was done. And then I started kind of coming on.
Anybody else with us?
No.
It's just you and I?
Not that I remember. Because we kind of, humbly started partnering with them. And they had a crew that we were getting to know. Because I remember there was a whole bunch of shenanigans going on during breaks and different things that were like, what is this? And then I remember Brad coming on because then I had just gotten our first minivan.
Right.
And I came to pick up Brad that I love very much.
Yeah.
And he spilled coffee in my new van.
Yes.
And then didn't really say sorry. But it's just a spill.
Yeah.
It just happens. So he came in a little bit through.
To play cards. But I also did. That's also when I bought my Nighthawk, my Honda Nighthawk 1982. And because I remember riding my motorbike up to Heritage Hills for a while there. So
a few of the highlights I remember from that frame, there's two things that come to mind. I know I screwed up building the stairs. And if I built the stairs too wide, didn't take into account drywall, I screwed something. I had to take them apart.
Yeah.
And I was mad. I was like at myself. I was pissed. And I remember,
and that's something that people working with you would have to learn is that if you were angry, you weren't usually angry at a person.
Yeah.
It was angry just with that pressure that you feel to do a really good job.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I remember working on ripping those stupid stairs apart and driving my nail bar in somewhere, and it kind of got wedged in and stuck. And I just took my hammer and just side swatted it to knock it loose, and it came loose and sailed across the entryway and out the front door opening and like tumbled out onto the driveway. And I remember you guys being like, "Oh, geez, I'm just pissed."
Yeah.
So I had my own little tantrum.
Yeah.
And then you got to tell the other part. Was it you or Dustin that remembered it best about cutting rebar?
It was Brad. I don't really remember.
Do you not remember it at all still?
Not really. Go for it. Maybe it'll come back.
Okay. Well,
I
anyway.
do remember we were cutting rebar together,
Yes.
and it was kind of a little like because again, it's on a slope. We made a little flat spot or something.
Yeah.
We were cutting rebar for the driveway or the garage slab or
And it
something?
was a lot of rebar and
Yes.
and sparks.
Yeah.
And so I remember that much.
Yeah. There was another, there's kind of two little stories. And this one, I still am a little pissed at you for.
Okay, good,
Because
yeah.
you didn't seem
Guys.
to care. Do you remember this
I
one?
had to talk after this
Oh,
and work
man.
some stuff out.
He's like cutting rebar and he's handing me the thing and I'm taking them.
Oh yeah.
And for some reason, this guy just cuts a fresh thing. And for those of you who've cut rebar, I mean, it's red hot.
cutoff
after you
saw.
cut with a cutoff saw. And we're not wearing gloves or anything like that, both of us. And you're always handing me what I felt was the cold end so that I don't burn my hand. And so I'm sitting there not even paying, I do like this, and you just plop the hot end right in my hand. And I full on grab it, drop it, and I'm like freaking out. And I've got just a rebar burned into my hand. It's blistered like crazy. And you're kind of like looking at me with this dumb look on your face. And I want to like freak out on you. But I think you were like, "Why'd you grab that end?" or something like that. And I'm like, "You handed me the hot end." I was like so pissed. And like, I think to this day, you still never forget. Like,
I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have handed.
I just remember like, the white lumps all
just
through
like,
your hand.
and anyway, let's not talk about that. I'll get pissed.
Yeah.
But then the other, so anyway, probably a different day, but in the same place, I think you were cutting rebar, and then it was coffee time. So what I remember is that we actually went into the house,
Yes,
we were
that's
framing,
right.
and we're sitting down, and we're eating our sandwich, and then we can see a bit of smoke outside coming through one of the windows, and we're like looking, like, oh, it looks like there's a bit of smoke out there. And then somebody went over, and we've started a fire right by the rebar pile, all the tall grass. And those
Hot summer day,
again, know the
hillside.
Okanagan, like we have been plagued with fires. And when we talk about Heritage Hills, it's literally a mountainside with these like $1 million houses, like
homes, yeah.
beautiful homes, all up there, and
super dry.
and super dry, middle of the summer, and we've started a grass fire in the neighborhood. Right there. And so, we go running out there and we're like throwing plywood down on the grass to stomp it out. I mean, luckily it hadn't gotten really crazy. It wasn't a windy day. If it was windy,
Was it just in one
there's no
spot
way.
or was there a couple little spot fires? I felt like we ran around a bit to
Yeah, we did. I think it had kind of like wandered there, but luckily it didn't go up. And it wasn't till afterwards that we put it out that we started to realize how bad it could have been.
Yeah.
Like we could have.
in the moment, it was kind of more funny. Like,
Oh,
oh, shoot.
there's a bit of fire, you know. But,
Let's go put it out.
yeah.
Stomp.
Yeah. Craziness. So then we got through that job, and then that ended up being a good relationship with Rivendell, and we kind of started working on developing our processes with our forming, and it was the three of us from that time on till we brought anybody else on. It was the three of us for a few
years.
houses.
And I got to say, kind of as a last little comment, side note, is that we really looked forward to rainy days
Yes.
because we'd go to Luke's house and we'd play Halo.
Yep.
Those were good days.
Like I wouldn't consider ourselves necessarily gamers,
No.
but that was like the one thing was like
and we'd play multiplayer
yes.
and we would set it to like 100 wins.
Yep.
And I remember being like, whoever wins this is the legend.
Yep.
I don't remember who won. I'm pretty sure it was Luke.
I'm sure it was. I just remember I usually lost. Like it was rare. Like if I ever beat you guys, I was so stoked.
But it was
I got
so
better.
fun.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
And like, and oftentimes we wouldn't tell like our wives, whatever. They think we're out there making
no.
money, and we're playing video games. you know, for hours in the day. And then I even remember sometimes like we want it to rain so bad. And so I remember one time we were driving to work and we're just praying to God, like just rain a little bit. And I think a couple little spats came down on the windshield, turned it around, it's raining.
Yeah. I remember we called Luke and we're like, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? Should we call it a day? He's like, yeah, it's raining here at the site or whatever. And Brad and I are like, to rip it around.
Yeah.
And Halo. And I even think some naps were involved at times.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was awesome.
It was so nice.
But yeah,
and
you're
it's
right.
not that we don't work in rain. I mean, it makes it sound like, you know, but there were certain things. If it
There was
up on
times where when you're working just, you know, a small crew and you're making good headway and you had an opportunity to like knock off early.
Yeah.
Like, oh, heck yeah.
Because when we were working, like you said, we were hauling ass. Like we were, like it was fun when you got a fresh floor plywood.
Oh, yeah.
And we got into that rhythm, like, you know, we're hauling. So you're tired.
One other thing that came to mind that I'm almost certain was at that house that we have to touch on was a question that you asked Dustin and I.
Oh yeah. The superhero question sort of thing or something.
So I can lay this one out. So we're on break and we're sitting around and Brad looks over at us. Okay, I got a question for you guys. All right. If you could have any superpower for building, what would you guys each pick? And so we're like, oh, that's a good question. I'm thinking.
Because I had already thought of my answer. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to hear that. And then they're going to be so stoked about what I've already come up with.
So we're Dustin and I are like, we're pondering, we're thinking. I'm like, okay, I got mine. Yeah, I got mine. I'm like, I would want to have a perfect eye. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I want to be able to look at something. I can look and I can see the dimension. I can see exactly how long something is. I can look and see level and plumb. Plevel.
That's a level.
Yeah, that's level.
I can see level and plumb. I can see distances. I don't need to write anything down. I can just like look, cut, like a perfect eye. I'm like, oh, that's pretty legit. That's a good one. Mm-hmm. And then Dustin's like, I want to be able to move things with my mind. Mm-hmm. And like, oh. And so also we're like, yeah, I'll just
wait. The picture was Luke's able to stand at one corner of the property and he's able to look at everything, all the material, and he can tell me what he needs. And I can just cut it, move it, put the nails in. It's all fastened and building in front of our eyes. And we're just sitting in lawn chairs. Yeah. And then what was Brad's?
Well, I think after hearing that, I realized I'm not even needed. Like, your two superpowers, I'm obsolete. But like, so then I'm like, sheepishly, I'm like, I didn't even want to say what mine was. And they're like, what was it? I'm like, I'm like, no, really. And my brilliant thing was that right here about this part of my arm, and for you just listening on the podcast, you can't see, but that I would have an extra joint in between my wrist and my elbow. So that in those really tricky spots when you're trying to get up in the trusses and you're trying to get that one awkward thing in there, you'd have this extra joint that you could like really get into those tricky spots to get the nails in. And that was like my superpower. And I remember we just lost it and they just never let me live that one down.
You go ahead. That's your superpower.
Yeah. So
Brad's third elbow. Yeah. That's good.
Pretty sweet.
All right. Well, that was super fun. I think we'll call her quits there and then we'll get into the building of the crew and other projects and stuff later on. So thanks again, guys. That was super fun. Thanks for tuning in and watching or listening.